if a man wrongs you, forgive him lest there be two bad men. And he was going to kill himself as a member of the church. Radically sets him free, and all suicidal thoughts and tendencies completely broken. You have grown taller twice. You got gold teeth.
Yeah, before the taller, my feet grew.
I've looked for quotes on miracles, prophetic, supernatural signs and wonders, gifts of the Spirit, fruits of the Spirit. Those are lesser. When I started looking for quotes on forgiveness,
people have lived this thing out.
The Alexandrian Library, if it were all books on forgiveness, I mean, honestly. Hey guys, I'm Jonathan with the Lion Company. I am excited to be joined again by my lovely, amazing, beautiful wife, Gina. Say hello.
Hi, guys.
I don't have to tell you that anymore, do I? Have we done this long enough that I should even say
do
hello?
Do we need to? We just start talking next time?
I think so. I think we might just start like a random, let's start the conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe no introduction next time. Maybe we just leave it out in the void. If you don't know who we are, you should know.
you know.
By now.
I don't think it's like
they
that
don't know
yet.
They're going to know. I don't know.
I don't know.
I want to start this very deep. We're just going to swing right in.
Very deep.
Right. I have an impossible question for you.
Oh, great.
Completely unscripted.
Impossible question.
The impossible question.
Okay.
If you could ask God, it sounds so ominous already.
I actually loved it already. It took the weight off of it.
If you can ask God.
Okay.
If you could ask God for one seemingly impossible thing right now.
Okay.
No limits. What would it be?
Ooh.
And what might be holding you back from asking God for the thing that you could ask him without limits?
Dude, I already lived that way.
Okay.
You're
already there, bro?
Oh, man. Impossible to me.
What would be the impossible question that you could ask God for if there were no limits on the question that you would ask him?
I don't know. I talk to him a lot.
I know
he's a good daddy, so I ask for a lot.
I'm asking the wrong person here.
Yeah, maybe next question.
And next question. When you hear the word forgiveness or faith.
Okay.
Forgiveness or faith?
Forgiveness or faith.
What's the first image or word that comes to mind?
Okay. Forgiveness, the first image is other people. And faith, the first image is Jesus on the cross.
So you think of Jesus on the cross when you correlate faith. That's interesting.
That was like the first thing that came.
Okay. I mean, it sounds, on the surface, it sounds a little...
No, but I think
predictable
it's because I said it came first. It was the first image.
I mean...
It's a pretty deep...
If I said, when you think of miracles, what do you think about Jesus on the cross? We're
talking about faith, though.
Right.
And so the disciples struggled with faith while they were walking with him.
Right.
And they still didn't get it until after he died and was resurrected. And by his stripes, we are healed. It's like everything that faith interacts with for us on this side of the cross is the cross. So that's why faith.
So you believe like faith is like the birthplace of your faith.
It's where he taught and then he established and proved.
Yeah.
And so here we are on the other side of that.
Over the last year, you and I have been asked to speak at several places, and we've been on the road a lot.
It makes me sleepy thinking about it.
And we're home now.
Yay.
For a while. Maybe not forever. Obviously, we're going to be traveling again this year.
Yeah, we just feel like an intentional reprieve that God is asking of us.
I like the word reprieve.
I like
it sounds
too.
Smart. I don't know. I'd have to be smart to know. You were asked with me to speak at an event recently where we both went, and I gave one talk kind of like to close out this event, and you were one of the talks kind of leading up to the close, and it was kind of pivotal because your talk really made way for people to engage God. And it was over the subject of forgiveness. Sometime at home after being gone forever, it seems like we were revelating on forgiveness.
Yeah.
You and I were having this conversation about the paradox of forgiveness and the ability to forgive or withhold sin.
Yeah.
There's a scripture here that really encourages me when it comes to forgiveness. It's Jesus speaking. It's in John 20, verse 23. He says, if you forgive the sins of any, not some, of any, they are forgiven them.
Yeah.
If you withhold forgiveness from any, it is withheld.
It's terrifying.
He says that. In Matthew 18:18, Jesus says something else regarding forgiveness. Jesus says, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Mm-hmm. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. This is where it gets squirrely. A little squirrely.
Okay.
Mark 11:25. And whenever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. I'm going to start over. John 20:23. If you forgive, they're forgiven.
Yeah.
If you retain, they're retained.
Right.
Matthew 18:18. Bind on earth, it's bound in heaven. If you loose on earth, it's loosed in heaven. There's like a correlation of authority.
It all really still sounds like good news, too.
It
We're
really
like,
does.
ooh, okay.
Right. I have the ability to forgive sin. I have the ability to withhold sin. Like, I have some people on a list in my heart that I would love to withhold their sin. Not true. It's a lot of authority.
Yeah.
To give away, to give us his authority.
Yes.
To say, if you forgive, they're forgiven. If you withhold, they're withheld. Their sins are going to be held against them. If you loose it on earth, it's loosed in heaven. If you bind it on earth, it's bound in heaven.
I feel like I could really squirrel here, but I'm going to stick with you. Yeah.
Mark 11, hey, don't threaten me with a good time. Mark 11:25.
Yeah.
But if you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, I'm going to say that again. If you have anything against anyone,
yeah,
so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. That's unique. Jesus, in one context, you're saying, if I forgive, they're forgiven.
He's like, look at this pretty sword you can wield. Isn't it beautiful? We're like, yes.
Until it's time to use it.
Yeah.
To play with it is great. And that's what we've done with theology. We've played with the idea of forgiveness.
Yeah.
But when it's time to wield it,
yeah,
if we forgive, they're forgiven by God. And if we forgive them, they're forgiven by God, and we are forgiven by God. And we have that authority.
If you don't forgive, the sword is going to be used back on you.
Quit hitting yourself. I don't even understand how we could miss such a deep truth of forgiveness. Mm. But there was an analogy that the Lord had, I think, given you or me. I don't remember. I don't know. That doesn't really matter. But we had talked about how God's invisible qualities are revealed in his creation.
Right.
And I was thinking about bees.
Yeah.
Honey. You see what I did there?
I like it.
I was thinking about bees. God created, says you have the power to wound, but if you do, it's going to cost you your life. So make sure that whatever you're willing to plant your sword in, you're willing to give your life for it.
Yeah. Your eternal life when you mirror it to what Jesus is saying. He had to do that, though, because that is the part of him laying down his life and picking it back up again so that we might be like him. We had to have authority like him.
Well, there's this part of unforgiveness, isn't it, that requires us to give up love for the individual in order to judge them.
Mm. Yeah, it is. It's a give and take.
Mark Twain said this, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heels of those that crush it.
It's beautiful.
That started a series of events in my heart about understanding when knowing and forgiving agree in humility, mercy is born. When knowing and forgiving agree in humility,
yes,
mercy is the child.
Yeah.
Which means mercy is not an act of weakness, but rather it is birthed in the fire of pain. There's a part of my heart that has wanted to turn a blind eye to the wrongdoing of others in the name of love, and not wanting to dig deeper into the thing for the sake of honor and respect. But what I've learned is that I cannot give grace or forgive what I do not see and acknowledge. And I can forgive somebody in advance before they acknowledge it.
I think if we felt that we needed to acknowledge or put attention to something before we forgave it, people would have some work to do. And I think sometimes it feels like, where do you start? And so a lot of people have seen others not start. And so they just follow the trend of, this is what we do. This is how we handle this. We're usually taught by other people's actions. And a lot of times other people's actions have showed us that mercy or forgiveness looks like turning a blind eye. And so that has become the new norm for us, is that, oh, well, they say don't address it, turn a blind eye, accept it, show love anyways. And that is mercy. That is forgiveness.
How do you feel about that?
I don't love that.
What makes you not love it?
It creates a passive aggressiveness in relationships, and it creates a model of allowing wrongdoers to stay doing what they're doing in a hidden way where that no one's addressing it.
So what about this situation really makes you uncomfortable? Like you've stated what you believe is going on, but what is it about turning a blind eye that maybe rubs you the wrong way?
Maybe after being a mom, it probably has become more clear to me why that would bother me if I turn a blind eye to everything that my son does.
He's not perfect.
He's not perfect. Oh, don't tell him.
Shh. Never watch this, son.
No, he knows that I'm not perfect, and he knows that you're not perfect. Right. So then he knows he's not perfect. But if I just turn a blind eye to things that he does, then he would not be growing, and I wouldn't be teaching him how Jesus says we should act and what needs to be changed. And so really, if we are to make disciples, and that is our mandate, we can't continue to turn a blind eye because we're discipling in the wrong direction. We're discipling to be like the world instead of to be like Jesus. You need to actually address things and correct them.
Right. And so then you can give grace to what you've seen. You agree with that then?
Yes.
It's good to know. It's good to know we agree. I want to read the quotes that the Lord gave me, but there's so many. When I started reading the quotes, I almost got lost in quotes. Help, I'm lost in quotes. Mercy cries out, a person's soul is more valuable than justice.
Come on. Earlier, you're talking about mercy and seeing people. If you want to forgive, if you name the qualities of the person and the things that you love, and you name what Jesus sees in them, all of a sudden you don't have that rage in your heart towards the person, and forgiveness can see the good qualities.
Which is typically the deepest part of a person.
Yeah. Mercy
looks at the potential of who the person should be, and it gives them an opportunity. Thomas Fuller said this: he that cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself. For every man has need to be forgiven. Yeah. I love the idea that forgiveness is looked at as a bridge that both people are traveling on. And if I withhold it from you, I have no way across.
Yeah.
Which is great, because that's exactly what Jesus was communicating. He was saying, if you don't forgive, you can't be forgiven, which means it really is like a bridge. And that analogy beautifully encapsulates the understanding that I cut off my connection to the next road of my life. If I break off, I blow up the bridge in order to keep you from having access to me. Yeah. I'm also walling off my ability to move on.
I think every time you let go of an offense, there's great relief. If you're human and you're dealing with people, you have to do this periodically. Probably some of the first times that I learned to do that, whenever I got filled with the Spirit and started to understand how this works. I remember a time when we weren't listening to speakers. We were only listening to Holy Spirit. And I think you go in waves where that you are looking and listening, and sometimes you're just inward and in the Word and with Holy Spirit. And you felt the unction to turn on a certain speaker. And
oh, yeah.
His whole message was this exactly, about forgiveness, and
didn't like it. Had a lot of unforgiveness in my heart. I know actually the situation you're talking about, and I was in a position where I had legitimately been wronged in ministry. I had dealt with the pain and the fallout of literal years of unforgiveness this person had toward a perceived wrong that we had caused. I felt unequivocally wronged.
Yeah.
There was a moment during this message when God kind of nudged me, implying, it's a good message, isn't it? And I remembered thinking, no, Lord, this is an offensive message. This applies greatly to everybody who isn't me. Like the whole world needs this except for me. But I got over myself, and you and I had spent some time in prayer. Yeah. And you decided with me, I guess, you may have been the nudger in this. If we're going to call this one person, why don't we go ahead and make a list of every person who's ever wronged either one of us?
Yeah.
For what, babe? Why are we making this full list? I know it's about this one situation only, for sure. God would not have me make peace with all of my enemies. That's ridiculous. What are we, Jesus? And I didn't realize that when I asked the Lord for all of the people, and I think I kind of asked in accordance to the message, Lord, how many people are keeping me from obtaining mercy for myself? Many people think that when we have forgotten the feelings of the pain, that we've forgiven.
Right.
And we had went through the entire list, called every person, and even in some extreme, like the really hurtful ones, invited people over to serve them meals.
Yes. Yeah. You got to do the biggest for the most painful.
I guess I didn't really know what the Lord was doing, but there was a sense of relief. I didn't know that we felt heavy.
Yeah.
I was happy to come to this place of just letting go of the weight to where I could now talk about these people with no ill intent. It was as if they had never wronged me.
Yeah.
There was no emotion. And it's not to confuse certain scenarios. This isn't a blanket situation.
Yes.
I use this a lot when I teach on forgiveness. If you lent me money and I didn't pay you back, but you forgave me the debt, it doesn't stop you from feeling pain when your bills are due, but it stops you from seeking retribution.
Yeah.
There's certain times forgiveness is just that. I'm not seeking retribution, but the goal of forgiveness is to reset the standard as if the person had never wronged you.
Right. And we're also, forgiveness when it comes to abuse, we're not also saying to the abused spouse to go back into the situation, so just the forgiveness doesn't mean I take more of the pain and abuse. So there are caveats, but forgiveness is not a caveat. You have to forgive them also.
Are there any hidden ways that we retain sins? When we were going through that, we had all these emotions like grudges or gossip without realizing it.
I think I had hidden ways that I was retaining sin or having unforgiveness because I had trauma. And so a lot of my forgiveness was legitimately forgetting. And that's how whenever you would bring it back up and I would step back into that moment, something about it would trigger me being back in that moment. And I would come back with all of the frustration and irritation of that moment. But if you would have asked me 10 minutes prior, I would have said, no, I've forgiven everyone. And, but it was more at that time I had forgotten the pain that people had caused me and not forgiven, the pain.
Do you think that that's like a coping mechanism, maybe even with you, but people in general? Do you think sometimes we don't know how to move on from the pain, so we just, oddly enough, we try to sleep it off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is probably the way that most people deal with it. They just try to forget. And because if you remember, it's going to ruminate. The pain has a way of wash, rinse, repeat. And so you can't get away from that thought pattern. And so I think that there's like this little pocket back here that people just stuff it.
What do you think brought you to the place where forgetting it was your version of forgiving?
I had no grid for spirit-filled forgiveness. And so a lot of
And that's in contrast to non-spirit-filled forgiveness. What makes you use that qualifier?
Because we can do things that are impossible when we're filled with the Spirit. So he gives us the ability to apply things that otherwise we can't. And
they just don't make any.
They don't make any. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It's not innately in us outside of him.
Yeah.
I had received so much trauma, and I lived in a small town. And so when you live in a small town, you're going to be revisiting the same people group that
hurt you over
that
and
hurt
over.
You and caused the trauma. So unless you forget and learn to adjust, you're going to be hidden and angry. I believe my mechanism was forget and move on, forget, move on, forget, move on.
Do you think that forgetting then was the product of losing hope in that situation? For everybody's understanding, let's put me in the bad guy seat.
Okay.
And I hurt you. And you forgave me, maybe intentionally, maybe the best that you knew how.
Right.
And I did it again. And then you thought, okay, we actually really need to talk this out because simple forgiveness didn't work. So it required now an explanation and an understanding of one another's intentions in the moment.
Yeah.
Then you make up, and then I do it again, and then I do it again, and then I do it again. Do you think that many people come to this place of forgetting because they lose hope for a better outcome?
I think they lose hope for a better outcome, and maybe they don't have the skills of reasoning. So I definitely did not have the skills to portray my thoughts and my feelings in a way that might make you reason with me. So there was no reasoning back and forth. And so when I would try and fix it, most times it would make it worse. Yeah. And so forgetting and walling up was my best solution.
Wow.
And maybe even calling it forgiveness, because I don't think that at the time that I was aware of the pain or the unforgiveness I was holding, because I think if you were aware of the weight of it, I believe you'd be sick. It would make me physically ill, I'm sure, and I wouldn't be able to go on. That is where I ended up, was in the floor, contemplating suicide, and I hit a wall, and there was no further for me to go in my own heart and mind.
You reached the end of yourself.
I reached the end of myself, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Let's talk about rapid forgiveness versus long-term, slow forgiveness. I think it was Maya Angelou that said, and this is one of your favorite quotes, people may forget what you've said, but they won't forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Early on in our relationship, we did not know each other well.
Yeah.
I know that's weird how that works. Like, we had these moments of tension that would turn into arguments because we didn't feel like we understood one another. And you and I would decide to stay up till 3 a.m. if it meant fixing it, as opposed to just going to sleep. It seemed like I had a revelation somewhere in there that said, the reason why we don't want the sun to go down on our wrath, and it was a metaphor, was because we may go to sleep angry, but we wake up bitter without the details of what made us angry.
Right.
Something about sleeping causes us to, again, that's the Maya Angelou quote, I remember how you made me feel, but I don't remember what you said. I just know that what you said and how you said it was enough to make me feel a certain way waking up. But because I can't remember exactly what happened, I know how I now feel about you, but I can't explain it. So the next interaction we have, I'm going to treat you according to the way that you made me feel last. And
now we're muddy.
Right. Now we're back in a fight. And let's say that you're the wrong one in this situation. You being the wrong one from the previous situation that I don't have words for now, I am treating you in a way that doesn't have a reason. It's lost its reason. Now you feel attacked. So now you immediately feel like you're the right one, and you're defending as if you didn't cause the pain. And because I can't put it back into words, it seems like I'm stuck in an emotional rut toward you. Now I've put you in an emotional rut toward me, especially if you go to sleep on that argument. you wake up with a feeling toward me and I wake up with a feeling toward you, it's going to be very difficult for us to come to a place of seeing one another and understanding one another because there's such tension. We've woke up with a root of bitterness. So the question is, how can we make a practice of quick forgiveness before bitterness sets in?
While you were speaking, I had the thought of you talking about our relationship, and a lot of the things that would happen were really miscommunications. And I see this a lot in relationships. A lot of hurt and pain is caused because of miscommunication. And so whether that's there's not enough time to address the situation because life moves so quickly, or we don't know how to touch it after the moment has passed, and we feel like that would be dishonor or frustrating to touch it. So I think if we can over communicate would be something. And maybe if we can try not to be in such a hurry with each other and just kind of glaze over wording that might make us feel a certain way. Or if we're speaking to someone, we see their face change, hopefully you're aware of yourself and aware of the people in your life, and you know that something has kind of triggered the person. You can just pause in humility and say, hey, did I say something that was something off-putting there? Because my nature is to not offend you.
They wouldn't be in a relationship with you if they were trying to wound you.
Yes, yeah.
That would be really strange to only get in relationships where you can hurt the other person.
Yeah.
Like there might be a different problem going on.
Yes.
My goal in tension with you or anybody is to first give everything context. It gives the opportunity for reason to take place. You're stepping away from the emotion and you're engaging the valuable points that you see in the person.
Yes. Yeah.
In doing that, it has saved us from many nights of arguing.
Oh, yeah. And it helps you step into humility whenever, even if you feel like you've been wronged, if you can remind yourself of the value of the other, then you don't want to lose that connection and you don't want to continue arguing all night.
Right. So. There are times that I've been motivated to get to the forgiveness part just because I'm tired. You ever get to that point where you're like, I'm just tired and I just want to forgive?
Yes.
That is tempting to do, but it's simultaneously a trap. We don't want to let tiredness be the motivating factor to bring peace.
Then it's not authentic.
It's not authentic. And that means tomorrow, when you get mad again, it is strange to me. This is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it is strange to me how we can have an argument and not remember what we said to each other the day before, only how we were made to feel.
Yes.
But then if another argument comes up
and fight again.
Yeah, the next fight, you remember verbatim, not just you, like us.
Right, people remember verbatim what was said in the argument 6 months ago. Yeah.
And that's another marker that you're living in unforgiveness.
Yes.
You see what I did there?
Good job.
I'm setting everybody up for that one.
Yeah.
You get in that place of tension, and if you can suddenly recite everything that happened in that argument 6 months or 6 weeks ago, 6 days ago, two things are happening. Well, number one, you're getting an evidence that there's still a place in your heart that hasn't let go. Number two, the accuser is working on your behalf to validate your anger toward the person.
Yeah.
And if that's happening, then you know that you're being set up. Either you doing it to yourself or the enemy's doing it to you.
Also, I want to add, forgiveness doesn't always end in it being made right. That would be wonderful. I would love that. And that is Jesus' heart, because he wants us to dwell in unity. But if you have forgiven people and you are trying to make it right and you are reaching out and they're not interacting back, you can't force that because people have free will. And so if you have done your part and you have tried, to talk it out and there's no response or no interaction, then God's not going to hold you hostage.
What if a person never apologizes? How do we still release them? There's the age-old, withholding forgiveness is you drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. The point is, you said it, we can't expect every time we forgive to bring restoration and union. Mm-hmm. I am not, in the context of connection to the person, but I'm forgiving so that I might obtain forgiveness.
Right.
So in that regard, if there's anything between me and the Lord, it's my unforgiveness.
Yeah.
So I'm forgiving and receiving forgiveness simultaneously, which is maintaining my connection to God. And so there is an act of sacrificial love that says the love of the Father is greater than the reconnection to this individual. And so I am forgiving so that I can loose myself from my own prison that I've created called unforgiveness. But I've also, in that creating that prison, I've walled myself off from God's forgiveness. And I know that some people, it's very popular today to teach that God forgave all and it's all done and you just have to accept. And yet it says, if you don't forgive, this isn't like a good opinion, this is scripture. If you don't forgive, you're not forgiven. And we see, again, parables being taught of this by Jesus about making sure that we forgive and that we forgive our enemies. And we even see the disciples asking Jesus, how many times must I forgive? Let's put a number on it because I know this person annoys me that much that I will bypass this number. And he's like, actually, it's a much greater number than this person could even do in a day, right? That's the ultimate point. So yes, while it may seem that this person and you or this situation coming back to a full place of restoration, God is fully capable of doing it. But the expectation is letting go so that I can be lighter at a base. Now, obviously, if that person is also willing, because sometimes shame can stop them from coming back and reconnecting with you.
Right.
Sometimes it's not just that they're angry, it's that you're willing to forgive, but they feel terrible. Maybe they know what they did was wrong, or maybe they feel like you were the bad guy and they're not seeing the situation the same. But again, that is not your responsibility to control. So you have to make sure that you don't live in this place of feeling the need to put your hand to it to make it right, just so that you can feel good about the situation.
Right.
We're not forgiving to satisfy our conscience. We're forgiving because it's the thing that God says to do.
Now science understands the need for forgiveness, and it correlates to health, and it actually is poisoning your body. Science says that now. So even if you're not a Christian, science knows that for health and for wellness of mind and, peace, you need to forgive because your body retains it. Your own physical man.
Well, yeah, it feels like
unforgiveness
is fleshly, but forgiveness is like a direct link to the divine.
Yeah.
It's when you begin to mirror God, when you really can forgive, truly. So what do you expect when you ask God for forgiveness? That's what you should be giving away.
Yeah.
Because most people, they want to forgive and they're like, yeah, but, okay. If you're, but fill in that blank, whatever that is that you think you would like to hold on to that for the pain that's been caused to you or the wrongdoing, just ask yourself if you would want God to do that to you when you ask forgiveness. Are you willing for him to trust you less? Are you willing for him to say, okay, I forgive you, but I'm not going to be as close to you anymore? We expect, when we ask God for forgiveness, full restoration.
Yeah.
We want to go to the bank, we want to cash in this forgiveness ticket, and we want to be restored as if we had never wronged God. But when it comes to people, I'm like, well, we can give them like half that because I'm not God.
I can't separate from the east to the west, but I can maybe not think about it for a week.
Right. I can go 20 degrees off of east, but more than that, like I can't go all the way. Yeah. That's a long way. That's like an unusual way. I have 2 feet. Where are these 2 feet going to take me? 20 degrees it is.
I think speaking on mirroring the divine and what it looks like to look like Jesus, I've been pondering the verse, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and what that looks like and what that means to us. Do you have any thoughts to get us started?
Do unto others what I would want done to me, or done unto me, if I'm King Jamesing it. It's almost like an investment of faith, isn't it? Like, I want to invest in other people, hopefully and expectantly, of what I believe I would want in return. I don't know. Is that right? Is that where you're headed?
I think we look at it as reciprocity. do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But it's actually about prophecy.
Okay. So I wasn't too far off.
Yeah. About faith and prophecy, because by faith, you're believing that as you do unto others, you'll receive it. But sometimes we look at it as we will give what we want to receive from man. But in the kingdom, God is the giver. And so we give. What does he say? When did you help this person? You were helping me.
Right.
And so as we give.
So doing it to the least, you've done it to him.
Yes. By doing to you, I'm actually doing to Jesus. You can't outgive God. He's the one that gives back. And so we're actually prophetically setting a standard to show people what the kingdom of God looks like. We give when you can't give back. Or, we see all these missionaries who have given and loved people who
can't love them back,
who are physically harming them.
Yeah.
And with tears in their eyes, they're showing love and kindness, and they're prophetically showing what the kingdom of God looks like.
It's difficult to encompass all that really entails because of the various ways that we show love. The statement, if you've done it to the least, I like that he pigeonholes us into understanding that it's not just your favorite people. Treat your favorite people how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Treat dignitaries the way that you want the dignitaries to treat you.
Yes.
The concept is you receive the fruit of the way that you love those who can't love you in return. You said it, reciprocity. We look at it as whatever I give, I'm going to get.
Right.
But when I said it's an act of faith, it doesn't take much faith to give to you. I know you'll give back.
Right.
It doesn't take much faith to give to someone that's more well off than we are, because I know they have it in their means to be able to give back. The act of faith comes when I know that I'm giving away love and it looks like I'm scattering seeds in the wind. Regardless of my expectation beyond that, God was planting a garden in the hearts of others.
Yeah. Sometimes we say the verse and we feel with our thought in mind of, I'm going to give because I don't want my life to be rough. I want this much grace given back to me, so this is what I'm going to give. And that is the basis for the why.
It's an avoidance of pain.
It's avoidance of pain.
I'm investing to navigate away from future pain so that when I'm going through pain, I can remind God of why I don't deserve the pain I'm experiencing.
Yes. I suggest that we just change the viewpoint and we look at it from knowing the end of the story. It's about Jesus sacrificing for us, and that everything that we give is just a love offering back to him. If we're thinking kingdom and we're wanting to be kingdom minded, we have to think others' souls and our own soul.
So maybe my prayer should be, and maybe the prayer of the listeners, is, Lord, put people in front of me that can do nothing for me, so that in my giving, only you can be glorified. It's then a pure offering. And from that place, then put me in front of people that will not change the way I love.
Possibly our love for being able to see everyone as equal is that we have had a past where that we came up not having the best. And so we can easily spot what it might feel like to be the least of these. And so that is like, maybe cry. I think it's such a grace that God has given us. Sometimes people think that hardship is, oh, may it never be, and thankful that they never had to go through that. But I'm actually the opposite. I'm thankful that I had days where that I was without, because now I really can, from any place in life, I can even spot the one who needs the love, because I've been in that place and I know what I needed in that place. And so I really easily can do to them what I had wanted done to me at the time, and actually see the need because we've been in need. What a beautiful thing to be in need.
Something that God gave us at some point in the dateless past was that when we go through various trials and suffering, there's a part of Christ that we can identify that we couldn't before. So when you say, I'm thankful, something was created in you that could only be created during the times of suffering that most people may not be able to fathom who haven't been through similar circumstances. And the people that maybe have not been through hard things, they dumb themselves down and they say, well, I haven't been through anything. I don't have a testimony. I'm not trying to play into that lie. That's not true. If Jesus Christ is your testimony, you have all the testimony you need. But I think that sometimes people who have not been through levels of suffering and they only have the head knowledge of it, they get the wisdom, they get the information of the pain without the experience. That's something that I dread as a father, is giving my son the information of the travesties that we've walked through without him coming away with the gold from the pain itself. Simultaneously, as a dad, I don't want to put him in a situation where he is made to hurt or to have hardships in order that he might see it. But I guess the other side of the coin is also not completely shielding him away from every hard thing, because every time that I protect him from something hard, it just means that later in life he will experience, because he will experience pain. He'll only then do it without context because I was unwilling to let him hurt in my care. It's difficult. And so what you said is so beautiful, because there are parts of you that have went through tragedies, difficult things. When people hear our story, I feel guilty in saying this, it's always kind of fun to see the look on people's faces who have never heard our stories and the hardships we've walked through, because they're kind of like, like they really, but we're smiling and we're saying, and then Jesus did this.
Yeah.
I had one of my bosses tell me, he said, I was working at an appliance store years ago. Okay. And he said, Jonathan, it's a wonder that you're even normal. Not even like in love with God, but like normal. And I thought, why do you say that? And he said, if I had been through half of what you had been through, I would need prescription meds and like a Snuggie. I don't know what he said. It was something like a comfort animal or something to walk around. I don't know. Maybe I just want a Snuggie. But I think, when you go through those hard things, it is very difficult for me to communicate a gospel that doesn't make room for the gospel also of suffering. It's nothing anybody wants. But it's also difficult because sometimes our New Testament theology has not given space to the martyrs. Mm-hmm. None of them were complaining on the way to being killed for their Lord. This isn't right. This isn't just. But in today's world, our theology has overwhelmed any understanding of what suffering really is and how to turn suffering into fuel. I think, for me, that's been a major thing, is just learning how to take the hardships that we've walked through and not let them overcome us, right? But we overcome evil with good. That is not a skill set that just gets downloaded.
Right.
Honestly, there are a lot of spiritual people in our lives that are really prophetic and really gifted. I've never had anybody say, I got a download on how to deal with suffering. The download is that you suffered.
Right. Or that you experienced his peace that passes all understanding. I almost went King James, where he came in and just gave you a blanket of peace in the suffering, but you still have to be in the suffering to even understand that.
Right.
So that would be the only download that I know might come.
Talk to me about faith. Mm. When I say the word faith, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
The very first thing that comes to mind is impossibility and thinking outside of what I've been taught to think in everyday life, growing up, and what's acceptable and what is likely.
Give me a precursor of something that leads to faith.
That leads to faith? Need probably leads to faith.
Yep. Or acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's desire.
Wonder
can lead to faith.
Mm-hmm. Frustration.
Yeah. What's a time that you were frustrated that led to faith?
Oh, goodness. Probably many frustrations that led to faith.
Is there any that, like frustrations that led to faith that led to miracles by chance?
Yes, there has.
Oh.
It's almost been 2 years now.
Oh,
We've been here for a while. We were at a conference and the main speaker was teaching, and he said, God's not going to give you muscles, and, you got to work for that stuff. And it kind of annoyed me. I guess it didn't annoy me. It made me reason with the Lord, because I do hear what people are saying, and I want to make sure that what I believe is right by him, and that he clearly speaks to the situation so that I don't think of an angle that's not true in him.
Sure.
And so I was reasoning with the Lord, and I said, well, I know for a fact that, people who have damaged their muscle, you've regrown it, I do believe you give muscles. And I appreciate what this person is saying. He's saying...
He's talking about responsibility.
Yes, he's talking about responsibility.
That's not what you heard that day.
I didn't hear that day, but I think it was in context because I understood who he was speaking to.
Sure.
And I already felt the frustration of the lack of faith. It's like mystical to talk about faith in the church.
Right.
And so I understood that was already... You didn't need to talk people back. You need to talk them in.
That day you were mad.
I was mad that day. Yeah.
You were like, what is this message?
Yeah.
That's ultimately what you said.
I didn't hear anything else.
And you responded. You had a thought in your heart that this didn't happen once you went home. It was sitting in the seat. You had a thought that was a knee-jerk in opposition to the speaker's message. Yes. What was that thought?
You give gold teeth to people who don't work for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't take responsibility. If you need gold teeth, you were probably not understanding of your responsibility. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And what happened in that moment?
And then all of a sudden my mouth starts hurting. And then I'm taken out of my thought and frustrated again that my mouth is hurting.
Because you had needed some dental work done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the next day, I had a meeting with a pastor.
Yes.
And I was going to sit and do some ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I come back. I've ministered. My heart is full.
Yeah.
You're asking me how my day went and how the meeting went. I'm like, oh, it went good. I'm catching you up. You walk out of the bathroom and you just said it so inquisitively with genuine concern as if you had found something wrong. And you said, babe, will you look in my mouth?
I wanted to make sure I wasn't swaying you.
But honestly, the way you said it almost swayed me the opposite. Like I'm looking for like a canker sore or... some weird alien tooth or I don't know. I'm not looking for anything positive because the way you had like concern on your face. So I'm like, oh, babe, well, then you fish hook yourself, right? Does everybody know what that is? And just yank to the side so you can show your teeth off. So you fish hook yourself. I like that term, by the way. And I look in there and I'm like, hold on a second. Come here in the light. And I'm like, babe, let me see the top. And I looked at the top of her mouth and the bottom of her mouth, and I'm like, 1, 2, 3. You have 7 gold teeth. And you lost your mind.
Yes.
You jumped on the bed.
Yes.
And started jumping up and down like you were 5. And you said, I knew it. Well, I had no clue why you knew it. So then I had to ask you to backtrack me in the story after you were done celebrating. And I'm celebrating. I just don't know why I'm celebrating.
Yeah.
Okay, how did you get gold teeth in your mouth? And, I don't know. So you catch me up in the story and what happened there.
Yeah. So you had left and my mouth started hurting again. And I thought, well, I'm going to look and see if there is something going on that is the culprit.
Sure.
I went into our master bathroom and was looking in the mirror and I thought that I saw my teeth and I thought that I had gold teeth and I thought, what is going on? And so I kept looking. But the way the light was casting, I wanted to make sure. So I went to the other bathroom and it was dark. So then I go to Prophet's bathroom and I'm sitting on the counter and I'm looking and all 3 mirrors say that I have gold teeth, but I didn't want to be.
All 3 mirrors. Because, if you have one mirror that says you have gold teeth, it's clearly the mirror's problem.
Yes. I want to make sure that I'm testifying appropriately. So
testify on
I
testifier.
need a witness times 3, evidently.
You need 3 mirrors to reflect on the goodness of God.
Yes. And actually, the first time that I'd ever seen this miracle was on a movie that we had watched where they had shown other people who had had that miracle. And so I'd always secretly prayed for it because I have had dental work. And so I just wanted it kind of to be solved for good and it to be the final answer.
Right.
And I'd actually been reminded of it because I talked to Natalie. We had Natalie on the podcast last time. And so we had spoke to her about it just in general, about the things that God does and what we've seen him do. And she was talking about how her dad had gotten gold teeth. Billy from Kentucky.
Right.
He has gotten gold teeth from God. And so it was fresh. It was refreshed in my mind. And so I was back to asking God for gold teeth, but had long forgotten it by the time I'd been offended at the message.
And then we kind of reflected on this idea that, faith has all these motivators. I think we talked about it for a few weeks, and we still testify about it because it's still relatively new, last couple of years. It was really unique because it set us on this journey where, Prophet is starting to take steps of faith, and he is like fueled by wonder. And so he's trying to do, miracles, and God is delivering. We may talk about those in the future. But then, right around that same season, you had another miracle. And what was unique is that, God fixed your mouth, no tooth pain since then. That's its own miracle.
Amazing.
And then one day I was coming down the steps from the studio and you were laying down in front of the television. And when I looked at you, you looked disproportionate in a strange way. And so I just noticed that your pants, they were like a jogging kind of material. Normally they're like down on your ankles and there's like extra material. And this was like a distance, not crazy distance. It's not, but it was up on your shin and there was no extra material. I said, you look taller. And I didn't say it as in like this, I've discerned a miracle. It was just like, you're taller. And you lost it again, but you weren't super loud about it. And that's significant in just a second. And I was like, stand up for a second. And you stood up. And when you stood up, you were almost disoriented from looking like down at the ground differently because you hadn't done that before. Well, then I said, okay, we need another mirror, metaphorically speaking. And so I said, Prophet, calling him down, and he comes down and he's on the steps and he sees you standing next to me and he goes, Mom, you're taller, like with no prompting.
Yes.
Well, then we all start celebrating and laughing, and I'm still just as confused. Like, where did this miracle come from? Didn't know that we were praying for your height. Little did I know we were praying for gold teeth. So it's not like any prompting from us. It was more just, here it is, it's happening. And then I think the next night, you have a very similar encounter with the Lord where you're using your God imagination and talking to the Lord. You fall asleep, you wake up, and you've grown taller again, like another half inch, which I thought this is getting weird at this point. I'm a very practical person. We see miracles very often, but it doesn't mean that I'm less curious when they take place. I like wondering about this kind of stuff. And so, we measured you, and I'm like, babe, you're 5'3" now. Yeah,
we measured me to Prophet first. That's why he was so shocked, because he was trying to outgrow me. And so he was in the race. I think
he was about to win.
Was he 12 then or 13? I don't know. But yeah, he was about to win. And so we measured to him, and he was very frustrated because he almost got there and then back down.
And he's like, am I shorter? I'm like, no, buddy, you're not shorter.
Yeah,
like Mama's taller. Yeah. And then just after that, so Prophet's having miracles again that we'll cover one day. You have grown taller twice.
Yeah. I think what happened.
You got gold teeth.
Yes.
And then.
Well, what happened, I think before the taller was my feet grew.
That's true.
Yes.
I thought the feet were second or third.
I think the feet were first.
Okay. Yeah, this is definitely.
It was like a swirl in this time where
Yeah. And it wasn't any prompting.
No.
I wasn't looking to have a wife with bigger feet. Let's just be
rude.
Really honest. Didn't want it. We had taken you to get some new shoes.
We'd actually taken Prophet to get new shoes was where I noticed it first. Because a lot of times I think when things happen to us, we notice first and then we just wait and just see how things come out. And so we had taken him to look for new shoes. And I saw a cute pair of shoes and I wasn't going to get them. But you said, oh, babe, if you like them, let's get them. And so I got my normal size. But I was getting them in kid size because we were shopping for Prophet. And
but you got the equivalent.
But I got the equivalent. And whenever I put them on, they didn't fit. And so I thought, oh, it must be this brand of shoe. And so,
because that's possible.
yeah, that's possible. So I got half a
That happens
size,
often. Yeah.
right, bigger in that shoe. Then a little bit of time went by and we were about to travel and we went walking, and I put on my walking shoes and that I've had forever because I take good care of my shoes. And I was like, babe, my feet are hurting so bad. It's so tight on my feet that if I have to walk the airport in these, I'm going to cry.
So then I knew just before then it was an emergency call.
Yes.
And that we needed to go get shoes. So I'll fast forward the story a little bit for the sake of time. We get you to the shoe store. We buy a pair of shoes, a little bigger than what you had, and they fit. You walk around the store, they're fine. You're like, okay, these are perfect. And you're still kind of correlating because it's a brand of shoe that you've had before. So it's not like the branding changed their standards or methods.
Well, both brands were brands I've had before. That's why I was confused. But
and we get home, and by the time we get home, the brand new pair of shoes now don't fit your feet.
yes. And I was almost worried to tell you because I didn't want to annoy you.
It was a little annoying because I don't want your feet bigger, and I don't want to have to drive all the way back out of town to go to the shoe store to buy another pair of shoes.
So I put them on and have you verify. And, and we were leaving the next day, so we didn't have much time. Or was it the day after that? Something didn't leave us much time to take them back.
So I think the moral of the story is, and all the details kind of escape me, but I think the moral is within a 6-month window.
Yes.
In total, and I would say probably in a 3-month window, maybe even shorter than that. It was really close together. You got 7 gold teeth that you didn't really pray for. You had your feet grow, and you grew 1.5 inches taller. Natalie's husband, John, comes in, and we're telling him that these miracles have happened. And John has a way with words where he just says it like he's saying common sense duh-isms. Like, you should know this.
Yeah.
And he said, you know what this is all pointing to. And I'm clueless, you're clueless.
Yeah.
He said, God is expanding Gina's platform, bigger feet, and he is making her taller to be seen.
Increase in her stature.
So there was an increase in stature. And he said it just so as a matter of fact, like, duh, that this was a prophetic sign, and it hadn't crossed our mind. And we were realizing God was giving you physical miracles based on what God was doing in your life. And so I kind of wanted to leverage some of these testimonies to point to conversation on faith in general. And it's something that, in these situations for you in that season, faith was kind of being, at least it started being steroided, grown, developed in you by frustration and then wonder. You almost started to kind of partner with God potential. Yeah. What else is out there? And I think the word wonder.
What does he want for me? Yeah.
It gets thrown around a lot, but I really think for you, it really was the word potential that blessed me, because not many people want to know what their faith can do.
Right.
And so you were like, taller feet, gold, new shoes. It was awesome.
That was the benefit.
Last week, I was talking to God, and he said, if there was one subject that you could teach on for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Yeah.
And I had no stop. It came out of me naturally.
Yay.
Natural. Came out of me very natural. I said, God, it'd be faith. I would teach every day for the rest of my life on the subject of faith and belief. What is possible, the potentials, the wonder, like what is our birthright if we have been given the life of Christ, and he can believe for anything. And when he believes something to be true, it just is.
Right.
So what does it then mean and so I'm conversing with the Lord. And that night, what sparked this conversation is I'd been having just intense pain in my wrist and in my forearm and in my elbow. It was traveling all the way up my arm, and I didn't really know what was going on. I type a lot. I'm on my phone, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm having some carpal tunnel symptoms. But it was weird because it didn't just stay in the wrist. It traveled to the forearm, and it was like excruciating bad. And then my elbow was locking up, and I thought, Lord, I want you to heal this. I'm laying in bed, and I say to God, I want you to heal this. And now there are times when God's like, no, you speak to it, right? And he kind of said something like that. He was like, you could say something to your arm and command it to be whole.
Mm-hmm.
I was laying in bed and we had said our goodnights, and my arm is hurting, and you've seen me. I'd had ice on it. I'd had a heating pad on it. I put a massager on it.
I prayed for you too.
Yeah. Everything was, nothing was fixing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was laying in bed just hurting. The Lord said, you could speak to this and command it to be whole. And I thought, well, I'm not going to wait then. Arm, I command you to be whole in Jesus' name. And half the pain went away. And I was frustrated. I said, Lord, why is just half the pain gone? This doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, if you could teach on any subject for the rest of your life, what would you teach on? I said, oh God, it'd be faith. And he said, do you know why your arm is still hurting? It's my faith. He goes, no, it's your conscience. He said it so gently that it was unsettling. And I thought, my conscience is pure before you, Lord. Like, I don't have anything going on heavy in my heart right now. And he said, you played games, you've been on your phone, you've been typing, and you think from a practical sense that you deserve at least half of this pain. Because you have been doing things that would allude to the pain that you're experiencing. And I realized I really did believe that way. Mm-hmm. So I thought that a miracle would mean half of the pain being gone. And so when I approached the Lord and commanded the arm, my conscience was accusing me. My conscience was saying, but you, you deserve this. And then he said, Jonathan, why don't you ask me what I think about your arm? And I said, God, what do you think about my arm? He said, I think it's perfect. Do you believe that? And again, no hesitation. Lord, I absolutely believe what you believe about my arm. All the pain went away. Lord, what are you doing here? And I said, teach me. Mm-hmm. I want you to give me lessons on faith. And he said, well, then I'm going to start by teaching you that your conscience is a governor that I installed in people to prevent the abuse of faith. And I said, what do you mean? And he reminded me of a teaching I taught last year about faith. And I said, the conscience, I didn't use this language, but it was ultimately what I was alluding to, that the conscience is what you believe that you can believe. The conscience says, I deserve or I don't. Mm-hmm. And it allows me to believe what I can believe for. He then told me, you were able to get around your own conscience by having faith in what I believe about your arm. And I felt like this major light bulb went off. What I believe God believes about my arm bypasses what my conscience believes that I'm allowed to believe. And there's a lot of the word belief being thrown around there. But I started really paying attention to this understanding, and I thought, how many times do sons and daughters of God negate a miracle because they've approached the Lord with a dirty conscience, and they've not approached God with his opinion of the subject.
Right.
They approach God asking for a miracle from their opinion of the subject based on their conscience. Who can ascend the hill of the Lord? He that has clean hands, works, pure heart, conscience. Mm-hmm. The ascension to a miracle, an encounter with the Lord, is about keeping a pure conscience. So the reason why the Christian, as an example, is not looking to include sin in the name of grace is because the supernatural life demands that we maintain a clean conscience so that our conscience doesn't govern our potential.
It's incredible.
It's what we believe we can believe. Yeah. Soren Kierkegaard,
okay,
famous philosopher, he said, purity of heart, clean hands, pure heart. We're talking about the conscience. He says, purity of heart is to will one thing. And so it's almost as if the conscience is the governor. It's the limiter switch and what we're allowing ourselves to believe. But when our hearts are pure, the governor switch, the gate on that governor opens up, and we're allowed to believe for whatsoever thing that we ask. Now, I asked the Lord, I said, what are the bounds of faith? And he said, well, I want you to only go through me.
Right.
Because if you go through me and it's done, then you know it's in my will. And that means that you never have to worry about the abuse of what you're believing for, because you're taking everything through me. He is the way. Any other person's a thief and a robber. So if we're using our faith in abuse, even with a clean conscience, but we're doing it outside of relationship with God, then we're dabbling in witchcraft.
Right.
That's what witchcraft is ultimately. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Rebellion is to take authority that's been rightfully given to me, but using it unrightfully out of relationship with God.
Right.
So if I use the authority that's been given to me outside of right relationship with God, I have to bear the weight of the choices I make using authority that has been rightfully given. And people wonder why the state of the world is in the shape that it's in.
Yeah.
And so people are doing things outside of, they're operating an authority that's been given as mankind, but they're doing it outside of relationship with God. And some people in the church that have right relationship with God have a heavy conscience. And so they don't see the flow of the miraculous in their life. And I love that statement. Purity of heart is to will one thing. This guy named Blaise Pascal.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool name.
It is a cool name.
In faith, there is enough light for those who want to believe and enough shadow to blind those who don't.
It's deep. Because you can believe for anything you want, even the lack of
Which
the miraculous.
means faith is the substance of things hoped for.
Yeah.
So when I don't want to believe, what I'm hoping for is that nothing will happen and I'm right. And so then I said to the Lord, well, then what's at the far other end of what's possible? Because if this is your requirement that I just bring it through you, then what is the potential?
Yeah, right.
And he was cheeky. He said, what is possible?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, God, you don't get my question.
You're right. Okay.
But what is possible?
Yeah.
And he goes, but what is possible?
Yeah.
And I thought,
He might have said nothing is impossible.
right.
I think the thing that limited me early on was tradition. One, I had been told the limits of God. And so if you skirted anywhere past what the practical limits of God's miraculous touch can be, then you're crazy.
Tradition then, like what you had learned up to this point, what you'd experienced societally and maybe in your church circles as a child, became a limiting factor.
Yes.
I can't quote who said it, but it was, tradition is the life source of fools. Because it doesn't require them to engage the culture or to challenge the system.
Right.
So when you accept things simply because it is tradition, then it's fueling foolishness.
But people have a strong arm when you touch tradition. And so if they may not want to engage and it's status quo, but if anyone does try to touch the walls of tradition to see if there's any barrier, there's a strong arm that says, that mocks you or calls you crazy or anything to make you not want to hope for more than what is allowed.
It feels like belief or faith or the flow of it is met with the rejection from the circle, whatever circle.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a church circle.
Yeah. I had a unique picture of faith because God has always done supernatural things in my life. But they were always reasoned away in a practical sense. And so...
Give me an example.
One example, I broke my arm 3 times in 1 year. So I would break it, cast it, break it, cast it. And the last time the doctor said, and it would break in kind of like a Z. It would break.
That's disgusting.
Yes, it was. And the doctor said, it's happened too many times. We're going to have to put rods in it unless it straightened itself perfectly, which is impossible. We're going to have to put rods and all this stuff. But he was actually operating on someone else at the time. So he had to come back to me. And so our pastor came and sat with me in the ER and was praying over me, and I don't know what's acceptable. And so I'm just like, and yes, God, make my arm straight so I don't have to have surgery. And they give me medication. I fall asleep and I wake up to the conversation between my doctor and my mom that they have no clue this is impossible. And my arm had straightened itself while I was asleep. And so they just cast it again.
That's really good medicine.
No surgery. Yeah. No.
It's the gospel.
There was other times where just like my dad, we wanted a dog and my dad did not want a dog. And so he was always pretty witty in giving us the illusion of hope. And so he would play these games where he knew he could win, but he was still giving us hope. And so this was one of those times we had to drive over the bridge to Evansville to get school shoes. And we were going to Chuck E. Cheese to eat and Shoe Carnival.
Let's go Chuck E. Cheese.
And they were next door to each other. And I had been on this kick of still wanting this dog. And my dad was tired of me asking for the dog. And so I'm like, Dad, can we have a dog? He said, I tell you what, this is going to be the last time we talk about it. Mm. But if you can get a dog for free in Chuck E. Cheese or Shoe Carnival, you can have it. And all I heard was, I can have a dog.
Yes.
And so the whole time we're traveling, it's about an hour drive from where we live to that city. And I sat in the floorboard and just talked to Jesus, like, Jesus, my dad said we can get a dog. And so I was certain. But then we went to Chuck E. Cheese and there was only pizza and
a big furry mouse.
And a big furry mouse. But I thought, I have one more chance. And so we walked over to Shoe Carnival and we opened the door. And Shoe Carnival, they do the mic thing.
Yeah, they always have the announcements like every 10 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
You don't want to stay.
Yes.
You want to buy your shoes and leave. Get the deal, go.
Yes. And over the intercom, it says, we have a kennel of free puppies. Come and get your free puppy. And I looked at my dad and I'm sure he was dismayed, but I was so excited about the dog.
Also annoyed, big feet and puppies.
So I was aware of God showing up in this way for me personally, but when it came to the bounds of it, it seemed like there needed to be a specific need and a practical explanation, even though it was a miracle.
My take looking at you from the outside, hearing that story from you, it sounds, if I'm putting it all together for the first time, it seemed like you were totally open to a miracle so long as it didn't involve intentionality from you. If it happened, like, wow, and then you'd reason it away.
Right.
But it's still a wow moment.
Yeah.
But if I told you, you could do that again.
That was outside
with intentionality.
Yes.
That's when you're like, heretic.
Yes.
Crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It did seem like once you knew that you could engage, then you started to see the supernatural take place.
Yeah.
One of the first major miracles that I remember for you in that way, the Lord had called us on a fast and you went through radical deliverance during that time.
Yeah.
And when the deliverance happened, there were these glimmers of you that would come through in the middle of this deliverance moment. And when we say deliverance, we don't mean that you became a better person.
No.
And that you overcame an addiction.
No.
This was an actual demon. Demons. I didn't stop to ask. Sorry. And they had taken you over. There were moments where you would ask me to take you on a date, and I had just taken you on a date the day before and spent literally all of my money on you. And the next day you're like, when are you going to take me on a date? And you'd carry this camera around. Why did you do that?
I would lose chunks of time and have trouble remembering a lot of times what had happened the day before. And so
you didn't know what was going on.
No.
Like no reason for memory loss or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just lost moments.
Yes.
And I would show you these photos that you took the day before and you'd be crying, which is really unsettling as me being a believer and a Christian and saying she's losing whole chunks of time. This doesn't seem normal. And then, we go on this fast and now these demons are coming out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you came to your senses like midway through and you looked at me and you said, what is going on? And then you went away again.
It's terrifying.
When you got delivered, I would like to live on this for a little bit, but I think just for the sake of faith and not really just sitting on the demonic, there are parts of you that was faced with the reality of a supernatural world. You had some context for it growing up, and you knew that it could happen to people like it did with your dad.
Yeah, I feel like I had more belief in the things that would happen in the demonic realm because I had seen that, and that was acceptable. But for there to be the same type of extreme things in the God realm, it was usually left for the Antichrist, honestly. Like that was my belief system.
You were faced with this moment of supernatural reality where this was clearly not the Antichrist making you do this. This was not God making you do this. This was demons. And so you had a framework. But now this random guy, I say random, we're dating at this point, is casting demons out of you. And now you have to kind of parse together this new reality. What was that like? I don't know that we've ever really just sat and unpacked.
Yeah.
What was that like to feel like you had a grip of understanding God most of your life, raised in a Christian home, and now you're having to relook at all that you thought you knew?
I felt like it was a rebirth. Like, just scratch everything from anything that's happened from this point prior and reconsider. And so I had to look at everything with a different lens because things were happening to me personally, so I couldn't put it out here and say, throw disbelief at it because it wasn't happening. It wasn't a story that someone was telling me. It was something I was living.
That's unnerving.
Yeah. So I couldn't escape it, and a lot of it was all good. What God was doing was good, but it was above my understanding. And so I did not have a grid for it.
Did it ever make you feel unsafe? Was there peace? What were the emotions? Because some family members in my family, when they saw you like first meeting, they're like, this person's dealing with demons.
Yeah.
People in my family, pretty spiritually sensitive. And I was in full denial. I liked you. I'm like, she probably doesn't have demons. But now you've got to face them when they knew.
Yeah.
And now you're delivered.
Yeah. I didn't really feel a burden with that because I had felt bondage for so long, and there was no freedom and there was no clarity of thought. So I actually felt probably clarity of thought for the first time in my life. So I didn't have, I had no shame. I had nothing to prove. I didn't have any pride in the matter. All that had been washed away. And so I was starting from scratch.
Do you know what's unique about that faith thing is that you had these moments where you were free. You're like, I'm lighter. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. You were totally fine until you were given an opportunity to share your testimony. Isn't that strange?
Weird.
And then immense shame.
Wow. It was like the garden. Yeah. It's like, oh, wait a second. Now I have to
now you have to go
with...
and be exposed before people.
Yeah.
What do you think? So you went from like, I'm a believer, but not really. I have demons that I know can affect people, but probably not me. Then you get delivered. Then you're baptized in the Holy Spirit. Then you have this
so many miracles.
Wilderness moment, though, away from your family, away from friends, where God just takes you through a radical metamorphosis.
Right.
And you come on the other side in power.
Right.
You're like ready to be sent back to the world now.
Yeah.
And God like puts a spotlight on you. And now you have this massive opportunity and you're like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
When you were in the wild, no shame.
Yeah.
When you get put on display before other Christians, now you feel the religious sense of shame.
Yes.
What do you think happened there?
I think it was my perception of the people in the church. I had the perception of pastors having never went through anything hard, definitely never sinned. Would it be honorable for someone who has done the things that I've done or been through what I've been through to love on Jesus, to radically worship him? Like, would I not be allowed to? Because from before that point, they didn't know my testimony, so I was allowed to radically worship him and have no judgments. They just, from my perspective, they would assume that I was like them, had no past. I remember thinking they have it all figured out and they have it all put together, and I don't want to have to go through and tell that I don't have it all figured out, and
That you don't feel worthy.
I don't feel worthy.
You just knew freedom up to that point until, let's say it maybe like this. This might be a good way to not only understand it and put a bow around it, but really just understand, I think, maybe what happened in that season. It's like God gave you freedom in that time because of love, but without responsibility.
Yeah.
And when responsibility was thrust on you to share your testimony, suddenly the weight of the reality of what God had done to give you freedom was then put fully on display.
Right.
Maybe it was the way that you thought that they viewed you. Maybe it was a religious system. But what we know for sure is that you had been given a season of freedom without any type of expectation.
Yes.
And now you're given freedom with expectation. And now like this new crushing weight of what is this thing called responsibility and expectation? Where is that in love? Because all I know is a man that delivered me.
Yeah.
But now I'm being sent back to people to say what he did and how he saved me. You freaked out over some miracles, but this was an equal freak out. This was not a miracle, though, in your eyes. It was for me.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I had never been given an opportunity with these people, and it was like effortless for you. And I remember we're writing your story down, and you're reading your own story over and over and over. For some odd reason, this is so funny, but you're standing in front of a TV reading your story.
Yeah.
I don't know if I always had a computer just hooked up to TVs when we would have encounters with God, but you're reading over your story on the computer, but it's on the television in the living room. And you're reading it over and 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 over. And I'm like, it's your story. You know the flow of events. And you're like, yeah, I just want to make sure that I represent the Lord well.
Yeah.
And so you were super prepared. None of us are.
No.
And yet we are. I like the term, we can prepare or we can let God prepare us. And God prepared you. You go up, you grab the mic. You weren't even supposed to speak on a Sunday. You're supposed to speak on a prayer night the night before. And then the pastor says, why don't we switch places? I'm going to give you the whole Sunday.
Please, let's not switch places.
Yeah. It was like, it went from like a 15-minute testimony to like an hour speaking.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous for you. And you go up there and you grab the mic. Hand is shaking. Can't keep the mic in front of your face. Crying and weeping, and all of your notes, just didn't look at them once, and you just wept and gave your testimony of the goodness of God. And at the time, I'd been a part of the church a large part of my life, but at this season of this church, people really didn't come forward for prayer. It wasn't a regular thing in that season where it just happened. And you give your testimony, and the pastor comes up and says, I think the Lord is offering an invitation here. And so if God is speaking to you because of what you've heard from this testimony, just come forward. And it was otherworldly. It's like the whole church stood up in this robotic nature and all came forward at once. And I remember this gentleman had told you, like I was sitting on the front row and just weeping because I was truly the joy of my heart to see you thrive. And you had never even known what it was like to give of the pain that God had delivered you from.
Yeah.
Like you're serving bread from the table of suffering.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, that's good. And you're like, really? tastes bitter to me.
Yeah.
And everybody else saying it's sweet in our mouths.
Yeah.
And so you're giving away. And I look up at one point from my crying, and there's this man, and he has you, like he's bigger than, he's probably 6'3", 6'4", maybe 320 pounds.
Yeah.
And he's swinging you back and forth, and your feet are swinging off the ground, and your hair, and you're just crying on him, but he's weeping, and he's holding you like, his name is George, I will love him and stroke him, like weeping.
Yeah.
And he had admitted to you, I hope this is okay, if I'm okay to share
Yes,
that.
yeah.
He had admitted to you that he was going to kill himself. And God said, just give me one more Sunday. And he shows up, and he hears this like broken person that met a man that told her everything she ever did and set her free and filled her with the Spirit. And in a church that he had attended for years, and he was going to kill himself as a member of this church.
Yeah.
Shows up, and here's a testimony, radically sets him free.
Yeah.
And all depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts and tendencies completely broken.
Yeah.
Because you were willing to go and make a mess with God on the platform. And I think that is the thing that we are missing in the journey of faith. Will we allow faith to be compulsory?
Yeah.
Like, can faith draw us to make a mess before people and not go for the fear of the repercussions of our steps, but to be so in love with God that we're inoculated from the fear of rejection?
Yes.
Because those people are messy and they don't care anymore because they have found a greater lover to care about. So they're no longer looking for acceptance. They're just like, it's all I can do. Andrew Murray said, true faith is born, his brother Andrew. Yeah. True faith is born where guilt and self-accusation are removed. The conscience made pure by the blood of Christ is free to believe for God's best.
I want our listeners to consider finding time and space to sit with Jesus and maybe grab a pen and paper and just converse with Holy Spirit and ask him, where do I have unforgiveness? Start with maybe unforgiveness with others.
Yeah.
Because that's probably going to be the thing that's taking up the real estate in your mind. Because a lot of times forgiveness to ourselves or holding odd against ourselves, we are so unaware of it that it's not in the forefront. So maybe start there. I do think that you end up working through places where you need to forgive yourself and give God the right of way. In that place, your conscience is clean because you know that you've actually given him your life.
How do you comfort people who still are experiencing pain, even though they are confessing that they forgive whatever individual for the pain that they've caused? How do you comfort them because they can't control maybe how their heart feels in spite of the pain? They just know that they can control, again, seeking recompense.
Right. Me personally, I've had God come in and comfort me in those places. Like, will you, say if it's a mother that wronged you, will you come in and step into that place of motherhood that I'm lacking because of what this person has done to me? Or, if it's a friend, can you come and be my friend in this moment and, comfort me and give me companionship to soothe the pain that I can't replace. I can't replace a friend that says no to me. Right. If someone turns their back on me or wrongs me and then doesn't want to have interaction, you can't force someone back in that spot. And so you can, Holy Spirit can fill that place.
It does seem like forgiveness and faith feed each other.
Yeah.
I know that the conscience probably has a play in there with forgiveness and making sure that before the Lord, you know that you've forgiven. Because it's not just about believing what you can believe for, but if you know that you have unforgiveness in your heart, then your conscience becomes a governor to faith. So they really do. It's pretty
clear in scriptures. That's why he says, if you've come to me, like before you come and offer your gifts to me or prayer to me, go and forgive. So really that is the verse that says that your conscience is a governor. He didn't spell it out in that way, but that is what he's saying.
Yeah. It does seem like a pure conscience is the fertile soil for radical breakthrough.
Yes.
So I just want to challenge as we end this podcast and this episode for people listening to go beyond bare minimum faith, really press into what is possible and to sit with the Lord after dealing with the conscience and just simply ask God, what is my potential in this world? What am I capable of doing to help establish your kingdom? And it doesn't have to be in a church building, right? That's not what we're communicating, is to do all this stuff to get into a church building to be big, right? It's saying, how can I lay down my life to see your kingship reign in the realms of my influence? And what is your desire, Lord, to take the influence that you've given me into new areas because of my faithfulness over where I am? You know, asking these conversations, it always seems like it starts a turn of events for us. When we've engaged the Lord in these conversations, it's likely that he's put these desires in our heart to even ask the question.
Right.
But as soon as we start, momentum begins to take place that we couldn't have foreseen.
Absolutely.
And things change. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would say don't listen to this podcast and let it just be another thing you've heard. This is not one of those. It's not just something you've listened to while you're cooking. Like, apply it, sit down, and make a promise to yourself and God that you will sit down and you'll work through the things that have been spoken about, forgiveness and wonder and faith and what are the possibilities of who God has made you to be. Like, actually work through this so that it can bring lasting change. Because if not, these things will come back up. You'll hear it at some other point, from some other person, I'm sure, but be better just to address it, sit with Jesus with it now and see what he wants to do.
That's it for this one, guys. We love you all. Thank you for hanging out with us and listening to our wins and our losses. And we're hoping that you can learn from them and just take the wins away and avoid any of our losses.
Yeah, Jesus.
Love you guys. We'll see you in the next one.